It's your girl Asathy out here in Singapore, and as always, thank you so much for joining me on the Night Out podcast. You guys, I've been thinking over so many little details and listening to all of you and the things that you happen to be enduring this year, a lot of the difficulties that you've encountered, the things that you faced and conquered. I'm so proud of you guys. I can't express to you how inspired I am by all of you to continue doing what I'm doing, and also guided to create more, to share more of my life so that you understand that you're not alone. A lot of the things that you guys have told me are bothering you or are phenomenons that you've encountered in your life that make you feel disempowered, or like you're not enough, or not qualified, or any of those unfortunate, uncomfortable feelings. I feel like I've already lived through some of those, and I want you to know that these feelings are not as one-off as you might think. It's a lot more common, and that's the reason I wanted to get on and actually talk about the idea of false pretenses. There's so many times in my life, whether it was in my family, like within, my mom, dad, my brothers, or within friends or cousins, or even in my relationships, my romantic relationships, or even at work sometimes, there have been so many instances where I have to put on a brave face and pretend like everything's okay. Or if I'm in a fight with somebody and both of us show up at the same place at the same time, we got to pretend like everything's cool, but we know that there's still beef going on, there's still something going on underneath the surface, and we can't really say it out loud, we can't let anybody know. But I also know that when we pretend, it causes a lot of confusion. So let me give you a couple of examples. There have been times where we were at a family function and I'm with my brothers or with my mom, and there have been moments where if you had seen us like 10 minutes prior to the fact that we arrived at this event, we were fighting, we were in a really big disagreement, and to the point that we've actually said some things that we couldn't take back. We were really, really having a big knockdown, drag out fight, and then we show up to this event and suddenly we're all smiles, hugging each other, holding each other's hands and stuff, pretending everything's cool with the world because we need to present our united front to the general public and our relatives. And nothing is more confusing than doing that, mostly because for a moment you get sucked into this idea of, okay, so everything is all right. Maybe we'll deal with this later. Maybe we'll go back home and we'll be a little bit more cool and calm and settled, and we can actually talk this out rather than go back to that veti, that anger, that hostility that we had 10 minutes prior to arriving to this place, right? So usually the car ride over is that place where we kind of calm down and settle into our game phase, and we go out and we do what we got to do in front of everybody, and then come back home, and then we end up continuing the damn fight. But it's really difficult because you have that momentary space where everything feels like it's okay because y'all are getting along in public, right? It takes effort to get along, right? And you can get lulled into a sense of safety and security when you do that. Now, it's one thing to do it with family. It's another thing entirely, and a whole nother level of confusion entirely when you do it in a romantic relationship. I've been in so many situations where husband and I were fighting, and we were getting ready to go out because we had made a commitment to show up, show our faces at some event or whatever. And we come out to the event, and of course everyone's going to come and say, oh my God, how are y'all doing? How's married life? Blah, blah, blah. And we look at each other and we smile. I'm like, oh yeah, it's great. We're doing really well, and I'm really happy. So glad to be married. We're so lucky. Knowing full well that that is a damn lie in that moment. But through the course of the evening, he would have put his arm around me, or he would have given me a kiss on the cheek, or if he would squeeze my hand, or any of those things, all in the grand scheme, like, the play that we're putting on for people to see that we are in fact in love and happy and all of those things, only to go back home and the ice takes over. It's almost like we avoid each other. We don't stand in each other's company. There's no room for us to go back to the argument or the fight that we were in before the event itself, and the space between us kind of expands. The elephant in the room grows a little bit more, and we're not allowed to talk about those things because then it's like, oh my God, why are you bringing up the past, right? So that false pretense you put up in front of people can be very, very unsettling and very confusing for either or both parties involved. And I want you to know it happens more often than you think. A lot of times the things that we deal with behind closed doors and the way we behave in front of people are worlds apart from the truth. And it is very, very painful for us to be able to live through those moments, because on the one hand, your nervous system kind of calms and relaxes, and you're thinking, okay, we got some hope here. We're doing okay. He's able to put in enough effort to prove to people that we are doing all right. And then you go back home and it's like, leave me alone. I need my space. Don't bring it up because I don't want to talk about it. And this matter is closed. That's it. So I want you to know that this happens. I'm not saying these things to dig at anyone or to throw in anyone's face that, hey, you're pretending. But I understand the chaos that ensues inside of you when you don't get to tell your side of the story, when you don't get to be who you actually are, when your spirit is rattled and upset, for you not to be able to say your piece, where you have to kind of swallow it and keep it inside of you for pretense, right? To pretend that everything is okay, it causes a different kind of pain. So when I came across this quote the other day, it was so appropriate and so timely that I couldn't help but download it and post it. So the quote says, sorrow eats the heart if you cannot tell someone your whole mind. And maybe it's not because you want to tell the whole world that y'all are fighting and so that, they can point the finger at the other person or anything, but it's the fact that you want to be able to talk to that person and say, hey, I'm not happy here. And how do I get to that place where we were happy once upon a time? What can I fix? What can I change? How can we solve this together? Sometimes you don't have that space to say those things. Being in an abusive relationship for so long, I remember so often that I would broach the subject and I'd be shut down immediately. Or if, they need space to kind of process or whatever, I would give them the space thinking that maybe they go away and they sit by themselves and they think about it a little bit and then they come back and apologize or, admit that maybe there was a misunderstanding, maybe it could have been handled differently, maybe they overreacted, or maybe they ask for my help so that both of us can sit down and solve it. But more often than not, pride does not allow that. And more often than not, they go away for a little while, come back again, and they pretend as if nothing ever happened. And that perhaps is some of the most painful experiences in my entire life. That's perhaps some of the biggest trauma. Those little things that happen over and over again in various relationships happen to build into the biggest traumas I've ever faced in my life. The possibility of doing something by mistake that might have changed the course of your relationship, only to find that they were so upset and so hurt that they needed to take time away from you in order to get over it. And when they got over it, they came back and pretended as if nothing had ever happened, knowing full well that the way they behave towards you has now changed. It has changed trajectory. You don't do the same things you used to do anymore. I've been in situations where totally in love with the person that I was with, I would go all out and do all that I can. And the minute they start judging what I've done because it's not up to their standards, I'm still getting to know this person or whatever, I start to feel lesser and lesser. And so when I get told off, I have this habit of falling back into that little 5-year-old child that makes more and more mistakes. It's almost like quicksand, right? The first time I get told off, I suddenly second guess everything I know. Second guess everything. I could be the most educated woman on the planet, the most confident, the most badass bitch out there. And suddenly when somebody tells me off and that person matters to me, that person is someone I hold in high esteem, they tell me off or correct me in such a way that makes me feel like I'm belittled, I suddenly fall into this trap of thinking that I am this little girl, incompetent, what do I really know? And I start to second guess everything. And when that happens, it's almost like nothing I do is right anymore. And so I feel small and feel belittled. And so if I were to ever go back and ask, hey, okay, so you didn't like it this way, what can I do instead? Chances are I get the response of, if you don't know by now, you don't know me at all. And I'm thinking, oh my God, okay, what do I do now? I've had situations in the recent past, actually, a conversation where I was on social media and they were on social media and something happened and they thought that I was connected to some random, I don't know what, and they decided to jump down my throat about it. They were telling me that, oh, maybe I'm stalking them, maybe I'm following them, maybe I am purposely doing things to sabotage their life. And I've never mentioned them. I've never tagged them in anything. I have never done anything directly, overtly, or anything, or even covert. That's not where my head is at. That's not where I put my energy. But because it's happened to them before, they decided to throw that label on me, and because they decided I'm just like everybody else, their behavior changed. At that point, I couldn't bring it up again, even though I begged and pleaded for them to explain what the hell it was that I did that caused so much pain, but I couldn't get a straight answer. And at that point I had to let it go and pretend like, okay, fine, you know what? I understand. Part of me understood, the rational part of me understood that this is a projection of their past fears, something they've lived through before because people have done underhanded things to them before. not realizing that by lumping me in with all of their past traumas, they're deciding that I'm going to be just like everybody else. They're not giving me a fair shot, which I can't control that, right? I can't do anything about that. But this is where I think the pretense that everything is okay when you're in front of people versus the way you treat each other in the house, or even still, like if you have a big fight and you go to sleep mad at each other or whatever, you get up and it's like, oh, clean slate, nothing ever happened. We're just going to go back to talking like, we're cool all over again. Leaves some of us really disturbed and wondering what our place is in their life, what our purpose is, our presence means to those people, because it's not clear. Suddenly you are feeling like you're replaceable. You feel like, you can't make things better. You're incapable of healing them or helping them properly. You don't know them very well because they feel like, you're not able to intuit anything. And so everything's called into question. I've had that situation happen at work too. I've had situations in hospitality where I thought I was following my gut, right? And we were told we were supposed to make small, meaningful gestures to make the guests feel at home, which means that the guests will more likely be able to write a glowing recommendation of the hotel and the staff. And we thrive on feedback, right? This is how we reward each of the staff members when it comes to end of the year awards, right? Who was the best and most hospitable? Who was the most attentive to the guests? Things like that. The amount of feedback that comes back with your name on it, it's, kudos to you. So I was following my own internal guidance system. I knew that when I want people to feel like they've been seen and heard and appreciated, I need to spend time with them, which means I have to sit down and have a conversation. So whenever there were children that were present, I would get to know the kids. Kids are so much easier to speak to. They don't have any pretense. They don't have anything that they want to hide from you. They really want you to know all of who they are. So they're happy and very forthcoming with all of the information, their likes, their dislikes. And so from there, I would glean a little bit of information and I would make presents that were specific to the stories that we had shared, which means it's not general information. Not everybody would know those things about them. You have to spend time to get to know them. And that's part of the hospitality process anyway. You're meant to get to know the guests so you know what their preferences are. But once I started doing that, I had people who were like, oh, I don't have time to go talk to these guests. I don't have time to go home and make stuff to give to these guests. That's not fair. And whether they will admit the fact that they actually, reported me or not, the relationship changed. And when I went to go speak to them or interact with them going forward, their interactions had changed. They were no longer as open and as loving and as sweet as they once were. They were not as friendly as they once were. Now people were starting to avoid me because apparently I changed the way things were done, and it forced them to come out of their own comfort zone, which they were not prepared for. And so what they thought they could do best is to collectively come together and put me down so that I no longer challenged their way of doing things. So I've had this happen in so many levels, so many different places, and either way, I know how much chaos it causes deep within me when I'm not able to ask for an explanation, when I'm not able to resolve it to my satisfaction. And that's not to say that I have to prove to you that I'm better. I want to truly understand. If there's something that you think that I'm doing as a threat, I want you to explain it to me. And from there, I will try my best to see it from your point of view. Because if I can see it from your point of view, then I know what I need to change so that you no longer see me as a threat. So you no longer see me as, overbearing or controlling or manipulative or whatever it is that you seem to see. I want my chance to really rectify the situation and work with you towards a general compromise where both of us come towards each other and come up with a way that we can both continue being friends. This is what I think is the whole purpose of really testing your mettle in friendships or any relationship. If there is a problem, how do you solve the problem? Do you do it together, or does one person quietly just, deal with it? If I have a problem with the fact that, you leave the toilet seat up, right? And rather than tell you that you leave the toilet seat up and open myself up for ridicule and judgment because, oh my God, it's something small, why are you harping on this thing? What I would rather do, instead of confront you, is just put the toilet seat back down. That is not a compromise. It's a behavior that I am condoning. I am allowing because I can fix it. I can rectify it on my end. But that doesn't mean that I'm opening up and telling you what I do and don't like. For instance, I have plenty of friends who are smokers, and I don't mind that they smoke, but I don't particularly like the smoke. I don't enjoy it. It's not a smell that I that I like at all. I hate it. Whenever I go to the club, if I come back home and I smell like smoke, which generally I will definitely have to take an entire shower before I go back to bed because I don't want to wake up smelling like smoke. I just don't like it. But for those people who are friends of mine and who are smokers, I don't want them to feel like I am not one of those places where you can smoke. You are entitled to your habits and whatever coping mechanism you think makes you feel safe, as long as it does not disturb me. And most of that means that I'm going to allow it while you're around me, so you feel comfortable, not because I like the smell of smoke. But even still, when it becomes like a full-on relationship or a long-term friendship where I'm constantly around you, I then, because I've allowed it a couple times, have lost the ability to tell you, hey, I don't like this. I don't prefer this. This is not something I enjoy. And I would, much rather be around people who don't smoke, but I do enjoy your company, so I will allow it. So these are things that if you don't exercise your right to speak up, if you don't find a way to resolve the issue, can really linger in your heart and really cause a lot of drama and trauma at the same time. The amount of times that I've had to pretend things are okay when they are not. The amount of times that I've fallen while, pretending, as in fallen for the act that my partner is displaying because it is affectionate and loving at the time, it's very it's very deceiving and confusing to me, because when I go back home, I'm hoping that, the charade will keep up, but it doesn't. It's almost like the biggest letdown of all time. So I don't know if you've experienced any of this. I don't know if you're experiencing something like this right now, but please know the longer you stay silent, the worse it gets. And yes, you run the risk of losing these people or making things worse. But I don't know. I think harboring this ill will or keeping these things inside of you really cause a lot more pain. So this is why I think that quote was very, very appropriate. Sorrow truly eats the heart if you cannot tell someone your whole mind. And if you cannot come to an appropriate resolution, a satisfactory resolution, it just festers and festers all the more. So I hope this makes sense. If you have any questions, please drop me a line. But in the meantime, do your best not to pretend. It is very confusing, and do your best to find a way to resolve. Maybe you need to speak about, resolution strategy before your next fight. Don't try and figure out a strategy while you're fighting each other, but when you when it's calm, which is also dangerous, you don't want to bring up any of those conversations, right? But it's necessary. You have to have a strategy, especially if you value the relationship and you're trying really hard not to lose the person. Because the last thing you want to do is lose yourself in the process. And I've done that so many times. I don't wish that on anybody. I hope that makes sense, you guys. I love you. Bye.